one of these petition forms on the table in case you wanted to give me your name and email to be up to date with anything that's going on. So basically, I'm here to kind of give you an overview of what's happened in Carroll County, because it appears from what we've learned recently with this environmental policy summit that we just attended, that wind farms for Arkansas has been in the making for 10 to 20 years. They've just simply been waiting for the right technology. 20 years ago, everyone was told, well, you're not going to be able to build them in Arkansas, 200 foot tall, there's not enough wind. So the longer they waited, the more the DOE raised the height of these wind turbines. So they can go up to 800 foot on land, and 722 foot tall is what they're asking for with the FAA at Cross County, in Arkansas, in the Delta area. If this were to happen in Carroll County, they're looking at 644 foot tall. Now, originally they started with 46 of these gigantic turbines, and then they whittled it down to 30 because of the FAA. We've got a direct flight overhead with the Air Force, and so they said, well, that's going to be a problem. Why they didn't take out all 30, I still don't understand that. So basically, it's an overview and to give you an idea of what we've been going through in Carroll County, because we believe they're going to migrate this way. If they're in Carroll County, this is just normally what they do all across the United States. There's 70,000 turbines in 48 states. And Kansas acquired 6,000 turbines in just 20 years. So I think we're in a unique place to get ahead of the ball, if that's in fact what people want to do. And what I keep finding out is that the majority of the people, I'm going to say 90% of who we talk to, they don't want turbines. They don't want to look at them, or they come from places where there are turbines and they know about the problems. Constantly on the Facebook page. You don't want them, try to get rid of them. They're loud, they're noisy, they're this, and the list just goes on and on and on. So the question of the evening is Madison County the right place for wind turbines? And that's pretty much up to you all. I'm just trying to alert people, give you information, and ultimately it's going to be up to your quorum court if they would like to pass an ordinance restricting the height or restricting the distance from a turbine base to somebody's house, which is what most ordinances do. Sometimes they put in a noise ordinance with the decibels. Right now, there are 3,000 counties in the United States, and over almost 500 counties have either banned or severely restricted wind turbines, because they've had experience with an adjoining county, or they've had one go in and they're like, oh no, we're not doing this again. I'll give you an example. Buffalo County, Nebraska. We actually called the lady, what's her position? The planning manager in Buffalo County, Nebraska. And they originally had a wind turbine setback of like 1,500 foot from the base of the turbine to the next neighbor's property line. Well, enough people complained that they changed that from 1,500 foot to 3 miles. 3 miles. Then they added in there 5 miles from a nature preserve or wildlife area. And so, of course, the wind company is complaining, well, that makes it hard for us to build wind turbines there. Well, that's the whole point. Is this the right place to put wind turbines? Because what are you concerned about? You're concerned about your safety. And these are the things that you're not going to get from the wind turbine company, the stuff that I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and give you my phone number in case you want to put it in your phone, if you want to be able to text me with questions later, or if you want me to have another presentation someplace with PowerPoint that works. So my phone number is 870-350-5885. 1516. So the question is, what is an industrial wind turbine? So there's a difference. People usually thought of, oh, it's a windmill. Why are you trying to stop a windmill? Well, windmills are about 20 to 30 foot tall. They're completely different. This is an industrial wind turbine. So just out of curiosity, if you want to say yay or raise your hands, are you familiar with the industrial ones all over West Texas, Oklahoma? Everybody have an idea of what we're talking about here? Thank you. So that's what we're talking about now. Most of these turbines that you'll see elsewhere in the
Go ahead and have a seat right here, folks.
are
Sure. Yeah.
300 foot tall.
I'm with the group.
So they just started making
I can move.
400, 500, 600 foot tall. We're going to be the guinea pigs. 644 foot tall on a ridge top that's already 2,000 foot tall. So they know they have to go high in order to get wind because Arkansas is a low wind state. You'll find that anywhere. You know, the GIS map will tell you we are a low wind state, and that's why we haven't had turbines. They haven't looked for them until we got to that height. The next thing that makes them industrial is the fact that they have to be connected by transmission lines. So not only do they build these things with a lot of concrete and steel and rebar, they have to connect each one, you know, underground, a couple of feet underground transmission lines, and then they usually build another substation in the middle of the grouping, and then they connect that substation to the next substation that's already existing. So if you were wondering, well, where might they put them here in Madison County? Figure out an area that's 4 miles from your nearest substation. That's about where they want to go, within 4 miles of the substation. And the whole reason that they've left putting them out in the open, in the fields, in the deserts and in the open plains is because they had to pay a lot of money to get the lines from point A to the substation in the city area. That cost them a lot of money, so they said, okay, well, let's just stop doing that and just build them where the substation is and save us a whole lot of money without regard to what it's going to do to the people. See, for the first 20 years, 1980 to 2000, you know, the sagebrush and the coyotes weren't complaining. But it's the last 20 years that people have started complaining because they're literally putting them in people's backyards. And you'll see pictures of some of these turbines, and they're huge, and then you find out they're 2 miles away. So, I don't care when you got a house that's, 30, 40 foot tall next to a turbine that's 644 foot tall. I don't think it might be hard to see, but for reference, this is to scale. Here's a person down here at the bottom. So this is to scale. This is how big we're talking about. There's this lady standing right here. So most of your telephone poles, 35, 40 foot. Most of your standard transmission lines, 85 foot, maybe 200 foot. So we're up to 644 foot. So we've got a lot of building that goes on with this project, and it's pretty much a private project for private gain. And from what I've seen across the United States, most of this energy, electricity, does not usually stay where it started. You know, it's the funniest thing. You've got 48 states, and they're generating wind turbine energy, and they seem to crisscross to other states. Well, what happens is they sell it to corporations, because the corporations want the green credits. I don't really know what that's about, and somebody can talk about that later, but it's a green credit. Amazon, Google, all of these big box places, they want these credits so they look good to the government. And so they say they're buying this electricity. So it's a private project. It is on private land, but it's for private profit. But what happens is they cross over to public land. And that's what our lawsuit is about. I won't into that, but that's what's in the newspaper. So it says, landowner and lawyer explain the lawsuit against the wind farm and the county judge. So that's where we are right now in Carroll County.
I'll explain the lawsuit.
Sorry, this keeps cutting off on me. Thank you. So let me give you an idea of the timeline and why they could already be here in Madison County. They could already be here. I don't know. I'm trying to get ahead of the 8 ball on this. There was a company called Clipper Wind Power. They came to Carroll County in '05 and they obtained about 6 leases, and then it just kind of fizzled out. 2016, the current company, which is called Scout, they're from Colorado, they signed their first wind lease. But the owner of Scout used to work for Clipper, and then he worked for a number of other companies in between there. By 2019, Scout had all the leases that they needed. They had 50 signed leases, and nobody knew about it, to a degree.
And Scout, actually, the name of the company is Nimbus Wind Farm, and which is owned by Scout. Scout is owned by Brookfield Asset Management, a multi-billion international corporation that has no ties to Arkansas other than to make money. I'm sorry for the
Yeah, that's
interruption.
quite right, quite right. So we had heard, I've been on the mountain for 12 years, and we had heard rumblings, but it was a joke. I mean, the guys would just laugh about it, and they said, okay, they want to pay me $500 a year. Okay, I'll sign the money, I'll sign it, I'll get a check. They're not going to be able to do anything. They're just milking the government, is really what my neighbors kept saying. So I didn't worry about it. And then one day I'm driving to work and I see this guy on a piece of equipment. Asked him, what is he doing? He said he was taking soil samples to widen the road to bring in the wind turbines. And the more questions I asked him, the more he shut his mouth. He realized he should not be talking to me. So I immediately got on the phone and we immediately got the story in Eureka Springs Independent. So if you go online to that company, you can follow everything that's happened since February of 2023. We must have had about 50 articles so far.
Caroline,
Yep,
tell them how deep they were going in the soil to test it.
they were going 6 inches. Yeah.
And how deep do they have to dig, or do they have to dig to put them in?
Well, the foundation supposedly is 20 foot deep, but every picture that I have seen on the internet looks more like 50 plus feet deep.
80 feet in diameter, 20 feet deep. Imagine a giant Hershey's Kiss of concrete and rebar, 90 truckloads of concrete for one foundation. Now, this is being, I don't know if you're going to get into the karst terrain, but bridges in northwest Arkansas are karst. I don't know if anybody been up to Johnny Morris's golf course where they have the driving range. It rained a couple of days. Next thing you know, they had a gigantic hole in the middle of his development over there because it had all collapsed. Karst is highly porous, as you know. There are water aquifers. A lot of people that live on these ridges and in these communities are relying on wells. Dynamite and karst terrain do not mix because it can affect your well. It can affect your well 5 miles away. It can pollute the well, and these wind turbines are. Some of you have this photograph. The hub and the nacelle is where the magic happens. The nacelle is where the electricity is generated by virtue of the spinning of the blades. That nacelle is about a little bit larger, actually a little bit more than a little bit larger than the size of the full, big school bus. And it weighs, I use this as an example. This is approximately the size of the wind turbine that they're proposing here. The nacelle weighs 130 tons. It's filled with oil and machinery. It's like an oil can on a lighting rod. The blades are, a lot of them are wooden fiberglass. They last 5 years and they get replaced. They're not recyclable. A lot of these companies grind them up and bury them where they are on site. There's a place down in Texas, it's nothing, I think it's like 500 acres stacked with nothing more than blades.
Sweetwater, Texas.
What is the regulation on this, or is there one?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Well, I got a question.
There are no regulations.
What is an actual rental cost or lease cost? What are they paying people to put these in? You said $500 a year there a minute ago. That seems absolutely absurd that somebody would,
Right.
let them do this for $500.
Right, yeah, that's a.
Those are the
I'll call
easements.
that yeah, it's an easement, it's a placeholder, because that's what these wind companies have to do. It's like putting an option, they're making a bet. Well, Arkansas might be ready for wind in 10 or 15 or 20 years, but I wanna be the first company out there. So if you sign this contract, and in order for the contract to be official, there has to be an exchange of money. So $500 is their minimum for an easement. Now they do pay more when and if turbines are built, but they also pay about half of what other states are paying. I was really surprised when I found out.
Do you know what they have projected? I mean, the lease agreements that I've seen, and we'll get into the reason why. The lease, when they have people sign these lease agreements, they also contain what's called a non-disclosure clause. So if you're a farmer, landowner, you sign one of these lease agreements, you can't tell your neighbor about it. So that when they go to your neighbor, you all can't get together and say, well, we need to get you more money. They're trying to, divide and conquer. So the only lease agreement that I've been able to see doesn't have the dollar terms in it. I think you may be.
I saw one.
So they pay they pay two different ways. If for instance, the area of land that Scout has acquired in Carroll County is 9,500 acres. Not all those landowners are gonna get turbines. They'll tell you you might get a turbine. You might get 3 turbines. But the agreement is written so that they don't have to put a turbine on your property. They may plan it out. The FAA may come along and say, well, you can't put one there. Or they may decide for economic reasons, it's better to move it over here 300 yards or for whatever reason. So they get a lot of landowners thinking, well, if you have a turbine on your property, you're gonna get more money than if you don't have a turbine. But by signing the lease agreement, you still use your land. They'll still clear cut it. They'll still run they'll use it as for an easement to run their power lines through it. They might put up a meteorological tower, or they might put an outbuilding where they're gonna store a lot of this oil and put it on your property. And so there's 2 ways of getting paid. If you're one of the people that has part of a $9,500, 9,500 acres, you'll get some money. It's like a community fund that is put together. If you have a turbine, you'll get more money. But whether or not you get a turbine is completely up to them. And the amounts that they project are based on 100% efficiency, and they're running 100% of the time. Well, they don't. They run about 15 to 20% of the time, if you're lucky. And you'll get a royalty, you'll get a percentage that they tell you what it will be. Under the lease agreements, you don't have a right to review their books and records to see whether or not the profit that they say they're making is genuine profit, or whether they're milking it by high salaries for their employees, or distributing monies out to their parent corporation. And we'll get to that when we talk about legislation and regulation.
So, for instance, my neighbor across the street, he never told me he was gonna, get wind turbines, he told another neighbor, and he said, I was told I was gonna get 3 wind turbines. Man, how they gonna fit those? Cause he's got a cliff down the backside, and he's got a chicken house over here, and yards over here, and the graveyard, and the church over here. Well, come to find out is it's getting closer to the date. It went from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. They wanted his signature for an easement more than anything, but he refused the easement in the beginning because that only pays $500 per year. So they said, well, we're gonna tell you you're gonna get turbines. So he's thinking he's gonna get, more money, so he signed it. But now, they can use they can put a road through his property, they can bulldoze his chicken, coop, he's already gotten rid of his cattle in anticipation for this. Yeah,
Caroline.
so,
Let me understand, that $500 a year, that's if you have 50 acres or 5,000 acres. It's $500 flat for your entire property per year, not for 5 acres, 10 acres per acre. It's one flat fee, and usually, they don't lease all your property. Like one of my neighbors, I've seen his lease, has only got 100 and something acres leased on one particular spot. In the lease, however, anything you have contingent to that leased property, they have access to, without any additional funding.
For example, they could decide, we'll put a turbine over on landowner A's property, and we want to put a turbine over on landowner C's property, but we need to build a road across landowner B's property to get from A to C. And where they place that road is up to them. Because you signed an agreement, and this is the most fascinating part of this agreement. If for some reason the government changes the tax credit, the project in Carroll County is a $400 million project with $130 million in tax credits.
It's insane.
But if the government were to change that formula, they can rewrite the lease agreement. As long as they pay you what they say they're gonna pay you, and they give you the percentages that they say you're entitled to, they can put all the turbines on your property, or they can put no turbines on your property. They can put an outbuilding on your property. They can put nothing on your property. But they have the right to clear cut your property and do with it whatever they want. You don't get the money from that clear cut.
this is why it's a raw deal, that's my saying, it's a raw deal for the
No.
landowner.
I
You know,
don't have the
it's-
specific dollar amounts that people make, but it is shocking how little it is compared to those communities where wind farms have been in existence previously, and the landowners have gotten smart and realized, I can get more money from my property.
It really ties up your property
And the
for the
other thing
future.
about these agreements is you're waiving all your rights. If you don't like the fact that the noise is there, you don't like the pollution that comes from them, you don't like the shadow constantly flickering over your bed, the vibration, or what's called infrasound. It's sound we can't hear, but the animals can hear, and there's studies that show that wildlife and domestic animals, cows, whatever, are less productive.
And that flashing red light on top?
Mhm.
That flashing red light on top. You waive any rights that you have to complain about any of that.
You do, you waive a lot, you even waive the setback. So that 3-mile setback doesn't apply to the person who signed the lease. They can put a turbine, if it's, let's say, 650 foot tall, they can put it 700 foot from your house. That's not a really good safe fall zone, if you ask me.
Well,
So,
what I read where those things can fly up to 4 miles.
yeah,
So if the blade breaks,
exactly.
they can throw it up to 4 miles.
Yeah, blade liberation. So that's part of the whole deal for getting an ordinance passed, because it's safety. The wind turbine company doesn't wanna talk about any of this stuff. They just wanna say that we're gonna give X amount of jobs, and it's for a short period of time, and it's usually not local people, because local people don't know how to build wind turbines. They say that you're gonna get X amount of money in, taxes, but they try to get away from paying those taxes. They'll do, the company that is in Carroll County, I looked up their record, and they have used a tax abatement and a pilot program for every single project that they have. And on one of the projects, they actually protested the amount that the assessor said the turbine was worth. They protested it, which, anybody can do. And so what that does is it ties it up in an escrow, and nobody gets the money. And now it's in the lawsuit, this is Oklahoma, and the wind company wants to get a good portion of their money back, in essence, not paying the county.
3 years ago, when, Nimbus or Scout, they reported to, the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development Council. They put together a brochure that they gave to that, agency. And they projected that, the wind farm would generate $4.6 million in taxes. When we questioned that, they hired a consultant, which I researched and found that consultant has exclusively wind companies as its client base. And that consultant generated a letter which Scout then gave to the Carroll County Quorum Court, saying that it was gonna generate $25 million in
Or,
property
excuse me,
taxes.
that's over 30 years,
Oh, 30 years.
not per year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so, and that was when there was gonna be 43 wind turbines. Now there's only 30 wind turbines. And, I don't know if you can trust the number, but as Carol was saying, whatever that number is, they're gonna challenge you.
That's their whole goal, put them up, get the money from the government, and then try to pay as little taxes as possible. What's your question?
Just in case I have to leave, do you have a copy of an ordinance or a sample ordinance that you can give to this guy, or the lady on the?
Uh-huh,
Thank you.
absolutely. I've
Got a bunch of them.
Yeah, we've been researching ordinances, let me tell you. So, to tell you where we are now in Carroll County, so we found out February of 2023, we put it in the Eureka Springs newspaper, we were on TV, radio, anybody that would listen to us, and we tried to get a moratorium passed, so that they could just stop, no more building, well, they haven't started building, but wouldn't allow Scout to go forward. Well, we thought that was reasonable, since the Quorum Court, half of them didn't even know what a wind turbine was, and they couldn't understand why we were talking about this machine that was killing birds, because it was just new to them. So we asked for a moratorium. Didn't pass. We asked for, I think, 3 different ordinances. Those wouldn't pass either. Well, as it turns out, one of the JPs has been working with the wind company to help obtain leases, and the wind company let the JPs know that, well, if you vote for this particular ordinance, then we're gonna lose X amount of turbines. I'm sorry, but who do you work for, JP? Do you work for the wind company, or do you work for us? So it's not been fun in Carroll County. I've been to every single quorum court, it's at 20 quorum courts now, and you've got neighbors mad at neighbors for signing the contracts, not telling them. You've got family members who signed contracts and didn't tell their aunt and uncle that they signed contracts. It's ugly. So the whole deal is to get ahead of the ball here. And as I was telling the assessor back here, you're not gonna know if there's any wind turbine leases unless they file them at the courthouse. We literally went down to Carroll County Courthouse and looked up leases for Nimbus Wind Farm, and that's how we found out. So you're not gonna know unless somebody tells you, but as George says, they sign a non-disclosure. So it's really hard to find out, and the wind company doesn't want you to find out, because they know that when you're in a populated area, 45 people per square mile in Carroll County, as opposed to West Texas, 1 person per square mile, people are gonna talk about it. People are not happy about it. The only ones happy, basically, are the ones that think they're gonna make some money.
And when they file these leases, they don't file the full lease, they just file a memorandum lease, which basically says, person A has signed a lease with Memphis Wind. They don't set out the terms of the lease, the money, what's involved, what the restrictions are, what the options are that the wind company has. So you don't find out about it, except by word of mouth. We found out, for example, another company, ENEL, who's a large wind farm, has been snooping around and asking about people who want to sign up leases. And that's what caused me to find this green sheet. That's an ENEL wind turbine, very similar to what's proposed in Carroll County. This is for wind farm in Australia.
So with this potential wind farm happening in Carroll County, now we've got a second wind company coming in for the north side of Green Forest, the north side of Berry, going all the way to Oak Grove, which runs up to Missouri.
Has
Okay,
Missouri rejected them?
Pardon?
I mean, are there wind farms in Missouri?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We actually visited one in Missouri. It was, flat, open, cornfield, hardly any houses around. It really does not need to be around where people live. That's our whole beef.
What the wind company did, what Scout did, when they found out that there was going to be any opposition to their wind farm, I don't know how they did it, but they used social media. They sent a text message to everybody in the county. If you are against zoning, that they suggested that what we were trying to do was get zoning passed in Carroll County, which is not what we were trying to do at all. But, zoning is a hated concept here in Arkansas, as it is in most places. And so they were suggesting, we were trying to get zoning in. And they were all about property rights. Well, we're all about property rights, but we're about, and then they send out this flyer to everybody in the county. And they don't talk about, there might be 15 or 20 landowners that sign these lease agreements. But there are dozens and dozens of people that are going to live around these wind farms, these wind turbines. They're not going to get paid anything. And our studies, we've seen studies that show that property values plummet. No one's trying to buy a house near a wind turbine.
Just think about it. Would you want to look at that or hear that?
And so the county has to consider, just from an economic perspective, you might get money from the wind turbine, but because of the decline in property values of the property around it, those property owners have the right to have their property reappraised and have their property taxes lowered. So if you just want to look at it from the economic perspective, are you really making any money? Is the county really getting any additional tax income?
If the property goes down around it, yeah. So in the wind lease that we acquired, they talk about nuisances. It's listed in the lease that the landowner has to waive and say, okay, we're not gonna complain and we're not gonna sue about this. So they just list it very casually. Increased noise. They never tell you how much noise, and they never tell you how far it's going to project. Visual impacts, okay, that's your view shed. Shadow flicker, that one is, the problem is the shadow flicker can get in somebody's house that is not getting compensated for a wind turbine. That's an invasion of their property rights right there. It can be on the road, on the trees, on the land. It's similar. Right now in the wintertime when the leaves are off of the trees and you're driving fast and you got that flicker effect as you're driving, it's like that. Another one, they just simply list this as risks associated with electromagnetic fields. They don't tell you what those risks are. They say a little bit about vibration, but not much. So they just list it very casually on the contract and then say, sign here and don't complain about it. Well, we have have since found out the dangers that they do not tell you, which is thankfully on the internet, on TV, and in the newspaper, so I try to get all my sources from something reliable where I have a photo to go by or a news story. Collapse. These wind turbines collapse. Boom, just fall over. The one that Angela and I visited in Lockwood, Missouri, I think that farm is less than 5 years old and they've already had a collapse.
One other thing I'd like to say, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but when Carol and we went up to Joplin, we talked to 2 farmers. And one thing, and this is not scientific, although I do want to do the research, but they said that since these turbines have gone in, there are 400 of them, they now have to dig 3 times as deep to get water. And this is what the local the people who dig wells up in that area, they're now having to go 3 times. Whether it's related or coincidence, there's no study behind it, but it was something that has just been observed in that area.
They do catch on fire, as George said, is an oil can on a lightning rod. Lightning's gonna strike the tallest item around, the tallest structure. Well, 644 foot tall is pretty tall. And Arkansas is a top 10 state for lightning strikes. I just think it's a bad place to put wind turbines. And so you've got hydraulic oil and different gear oil. They do catch on fire. They can be spinning with fire. And the local fire department can do nothing about it. They will tell you we have to wait until it hits the ground. And they're gonna have to hope that while it's spinning up there, that it's not gonna create a brush fire somewhere. So what happens is you've got these fiberglass particles and shards that are pretty much projectiles. And a lady had taken a picture of this fiberglass shards, and you can see with the ruler, they're as much as 12 inches long, and they're just all over the place, or they could be small particles. This is a BPA, a forever chemical, and it's lodging in people's fields. There was a couple that we actually talked to in New York, and it completely ruined their hay field. And they're not getting paid for wind turbines. And she was a mile away, and these fiberglass particles landed in her hay field. She could not bale the hay that year, which is their income, and she's got a family reputation of decades. Then she couldn't feed her own cattle.
Yeah.
She had to buy hay. She couldn't sell it, and she had to buy it. She's in debt, and she's trying to sue the wind company because they breathed in the toxic debris because of the fire. They were outside when it happened. So they're not taking responsibility. That's one of the problems with these wind turbines. They'll take responsibility if it's on your property and you're the landowner, the leaseholder. But if you're the neighbor, I haven't seen one yet where they actually help.
You're talking about what you've seen
Right.
going on there. I was watching some videos today of, they was calling it detonation, I believe, where these things where basically the gear reduction system went on to go out, and it started pinwheeling. And this thing was just spinning so fast you couldn't see the blades anymore, and then just, your wind just probably exploded.
Exactly.
So when they hit a certain speed, you have a braking system in them.
Mm-hmm.
And when those things go out, and they do often go out, these things go crazy. And then what happens, the gearboxes overheat, and then they explode. And
It's crazy.
So another thing that happens is they have a fancy term for this. It's called blade liberation. It means the blade just fell off. A lady found a 12-inch long bolt in her cornfield one day. She's got wind turbines on her property. She found a bolt, and then the next day, there goes the blade. So as someone was saying earlier, these blades, I mean, if they're spinning and it comes off, how far is that gonna go? A half a mile, a couple miles? I mean, who knows? This is impaled into the ground. What if it goes in somebody's house? Cornfield, and then you've got all the fiberglass debris. So I feel like asking for an ordinance with the setback is really a safety issue, and it should be done for every county. That's our opinion from looking into this. Of course, you're rolling the dice If you put them in, something may happen or something may not happen. There was a farm in Iowa, crazy. She had three turbines catch fire in less than 6 months. I mean, who wants to take that chance? And as I said, the firemen cannot put this out. They have to wait. And then they don't have the proper equipment. You're talking about electrical fire, an oil fire, lots of components going on there. A big concern for us when we first heard about this is our water. So as George said, we have what's called karst terrain, and everybody on the mountain has a well or spring, that's it. And as you can imagine, something as tall and heavy as these wind turbines moving creates a vibration in the ground. The animals can feel it, sometimes people can feel it. And rocks send that vibration, I don't know the term for it, but it just transfers from rock to rock to rock. It's a ripple effect. And it can cause sedimentation in the water. It can release shale, and then you've got black or brown water, and you've got shale particles in your water. Sometimes it's so fine you can't even get a filtration system to take it out. Sometimes it can divert the water, it can totally collapse, and you've got no water. And I asked the wind company, what happens if you mess up my spring? Oh well, sue us. That's what he said. How am I gonna sue a multinational company? They know they're winning. They know we're gonna run out of money. It's not fair. Cutting the trees. For instance, Scotland has cut over 16 million trees in 20 years. Arkansas is twice the size of Scotland. That's a lot of trees if they come to Arkansas. And it just baffles me because the trees help to reduce the CO2, which they proudly say they offset the CO2, but yet they're cutting the trees. They're releasing CO2 when they cut the trees and burn the trees, and now you don't have the trees to do the job that they originally did. So we've got this deal of erosion going on, you know, with the recent rains that we've had. Probably everyone has experienced some pop-up springs all of a sudden, or you've got divots in your road where you didn't have before, or the people below you are experiencing erosion and runoff. Same thing's going to happen when they clear 400 acres. They say they're only going to clear 400 acres out of 9,500 acres. We think it's going to be much more than that. And so what you've done in the long run is your neighbors are not happy. You know, you've really made a lot of your neighbors mad with this. They target landowners that don't live on the property. They target large landowners, somebody with 1,000 acres, somebody that maybe it's an estate, somebody that doesn't live there because they don't want any complaints. That's who they go through first. So tonight is to educate you all. You've got my phone number, you've got my website is on this paper, stopwindfarmsar.org. We want to tell you the things that the wind company doesn't tell you so that you can make an informed decision. There's only two ways you're not going to get wind turbines. One is if the landowners don't sign. So I'm hoping that everyone here tonight would let the large landowners know, hey, if somebody approaches you about a wind turbine lease, don't sign it. It's a raw deal. It's a raw deal for the county, it's a raw deal for the landowner. And then the other way that you're going to not get turbines is if the Quorum Court passes an ordinance. If they choose to ban it completely, that's great. Other counties have done that. Kansas has done it in many counties. Or they could just simply pass an ordinance where you've got a 1 mile or a 3 mile setback from a turbine to somebody's house. So, and you can limit the height as well. They've had some of them limit the height to, let's say, 250 foot. Well, they're not going to be able to build because in Arkansas, a low wind state, they want a turbine that's going to be over 600 foot tall on a ridge. So, how many Quorum Court members do we have here tonight? What? Okay.
He's District 8.
Would you like to,
Jeff's District 8, January, so.
this gentleman asked a question, Court, would you like to
Yeah,
explain?
What is that? What is a quorum member?
The quorum court is what handles the budget of the county. There's 9 of us that's for your particular district. So like I represent the Hinesville community. Jeff's would be Wesley area, and
Oh, okay.
so it's just the representatives, we have basically 1,800 citizens under each of our districts.
Okay, yeah, we live out on 74 between Huntsville and Kingston.
Between Huntsville and Kingston.
So that's Wesley, isn't it?
You would be, James Eaton should be where that would have fell into. So Shannon Fancher will probably be your new
Okay.
A quorum court is the city council for the county.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's your legislative body, there it is.
Can you,
Can I share?
can you share?
Yeah, can I share some information?
Oh, okay, yeah, in just a few minutes, I'm almost to the end.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, please tell the people that are here when the next quorum court meets.
We're the third Monday of every month at the courthouse, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And if you want
It's
to,
open, anybody can come. We're also on, government of Madison County, it's streamed on Facebook Live.
yeah, they do a good job, they do a really good job.
Can you give me that information one more time?
Government of Madison County, and it's streamed on Facebook Live on their portals. At 6 o'clock every third Monday.
6 o'clock every third Monday. And if
You're
you
welcome to
want-
come in person, or you can watch on Facebook.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And if you want to speak, you have to call a week ahead and talk to the judge's assistant and just say that you'd like, because I got 5 minutes when I went. Otherwise, you'll get 3 minutes, is that right? Yeah,
Okay.
which is
So
still nice.
if there is something on the agenda that interests you, you can show up, and we ask for a public comment before we make any vote or anything, so. And you can see the agenda online before we have a meeting.
Okay.
Is there the committee, the subcommittee, there's a special subcommittee just for this?
Not for this, we just going to adopt a planning commission
Okay.
to start handling this kind of thing. I'm on it, Jeff is on it, so it is in the makings as we speak, try to get an ordinance put together to our bylaws and such, how it's gonna work, and it's gonna take a few months to get everything ironed out, as we just had our first meeting, was it last week? We meet again this Friday we're just trying to get all the details ironed out, and that's where this will fall into once we get everything ironed out for that.
What was your name?
Cordrain.
Corderella?
So there's, as I said, there are 3,000 counties in the different states across the United States, 3,000 counties, and 500 odd counties have either banned them or made a pretty good setback, making it hard for the turbines to be built. And then the others either don't have anything at all, like Carroll County. The whole state of Arkansas, 75 counties, no ordinances whatsoever. So I am hoping Boone County, Newton County, or Madison County, one of y'all jump on it and be the first one to write an ordinance, because then that will then influence all the other counties. It'll make a big difference. Because they'll ask me, well, Caroline, what happened when you went to Boone County? What happened when you went to Madison County? I've spoken 3 times at Boone County, 1 time at Madison, and hoping to speak at Newton County. So what I would like to see happen, and you've got my text number 870-350-1516. If someone wants to take a leadership role as far as informing the public, I would suggest a Facebook group. My group is Stop Wind Farms Carroll County. We've got one Stop Wind Farms Boone County. May as well start one for Stop Wind Farms Madison County. It just makes it easy to remember for people who are looking on the internet. And people can post. I like to post news stories, things that are factual, okay? And that's how we're gonna learn. That's how we learn about these dangers with these wind turbines. And if someone wanted to start a petition that was specific for Boone County, that's helpful. And because now we're at a position where we're talking to congressmen and senators, and we can say, hey, we've got petitions with 2,000 names. So it sounds really good when you get to that point with your petitions. So you've got all my contact information, and Mike is from Texas.
No, I'm from California, so don't hold that against me, okay? I blame my parents for that. What's funny is when I was driving over here, they didn't know we were showing up it's amazing what I wrote on my phone on the way over here. You know, Arkansas is a natural state, right? So we get all excited about green energy. Well, I wish it was green energy. I come from the Antelope Valley out in California. I work for Northrop Grumman, building B-2 bombers and F-35 jets and stuff like that. I was a hiring manager for about 5 years for Northrop Grumman, and I hired a boatload of folks that worked on wind generators because they're mechanically inclined and I build jets. They leak like a sieve. They pour oil all over the ground. They catch on fire all the time. They don't generate the energy that they claim that they do. It's a big fluff up of something that, there's a transmission line that goes all the way through the Antelope Valley down to LA because none of that power is generated for the area. Here's some notes that I wrote, which is amazing that I'll write that. Is that okay if I can share with it? Okay. So, you know, we never learn from our mistakes in other counties, you know, or other states. We make a lot of mistakes. I encourage you to write this down. Write the Antelope Valley wind turbines and go look at the images of what has happened. So my mom lives at the very northern corner of LA County, right next to Kern County. And Kern County went full tilt on building wind generators out there. There's hundreds, if not thousands.
I think there's thousands.
We live about, well, my mom does, she lives about 10 miles from there. And at night, it's a whole flashing lights across the entire valley. It's hideous. The gear oil capacity of the wind turbines is massive. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of gallons per unit. So renewable is just absolutely absurd. Typically, look up wind turbine disposal is a huge problem, just like they said. There's hundreds of acres where they're just burying these blades underground. It's ridiculous. And the bird deaths due to wind turbines is absolutely astronomical. I mean, I imagine most folks in here are hunters, right? Well, all you have to do is just go out to the bottom of a wind turbine, you'll see hundreds of dead and maimed birds. And believe it or not, out there in the Antelope Valley, they use undocumented contractors because they can pay in cash to clean up maimed and dead birds around wind turbines to meet the monthly quota of what they're allowed to have for dead birds around these things. It's a shame. It's horrible. I mean, it's funny. You know, you could see a maimed bald eagle at the bottom of one of these things, and people get outraged. But if you have one that got into an oil slick because of an oil slick, they have a heart attack about it. Crazy. And then it destroys your property value. My brother lives in a town nearby. Can't sell his house, it's not worth anything now. They're unsightly by day, they have the red flashing lights at night. You won't see wind turbines anywhere near wealthy folks. You just won't see them. They'll say, not in my area. It's amazing how they want to put them out somewhere else where somebody else has to deal with it. And the power does not go to the locals, it goes to the metropolitan areas. And the revenue that goes to the pockets of the politicians and corporations, you won't see a dime of it, no matter what. And I'm telling you that it's amazing how they will woo you with these pretty pictures of these wind generators just, you know, whooshing in the air, but you don't see the background of it where they're catching on fire. I've seen them on fire. They drip oil all over the ground. And so what they're telling you here is true, and I've lived it, so I know exactly. You guys you're not even buttering it up, you're just telling them absolute facts. And if people knew what we experienced and escaped from, there'd be 200, 300 people in this room right now. So I'm just telling you that you don't want 50 of them, you don't want 3, you don't want 1. You want to ban them in your county, and you want to make that happen across the entire state because it's destroying the economy of a lot of people out there in California. And then what's funny is that when you said they sit there, it's a high wind area out there, but there's days where there's not a drop of wind. They're all just sitting out there, thousands of them, just staring at you, not doing anything. So what do? They put in hundreds of acres of solar panels. And what's funny about that is that as birds fly over, they think it's a lake because it's shining and reflected, and they go nosediving into these solar panels, killing them that way as well. When they first turned these things on, like they're saying, my brother lives in a little town called Roseman, which is near these things. There was rats and snakes and everything coming out of that area and migrating down the streets. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. My brother saw it himself and actually took a video of it when they turned these things on because of the vibrations. And you know what's funny is when I grew up out there, I used to ride motorcycles out there, and they told me, no, you can't do that because, you know, conservation of the land. And and then they destroyed thousands of acres with wind generators and solar panels. And the thing of it is, folks, once they get in, it's hard to get out. Now, that's Kern County, which is right next to where my mom lives. They wanted to start building in where she lived, and a small group of people got together and petitioned. They went out to craft fairs, they went to events, they went to everything impossible. They had a table set up and got petitions and fought, I don't know how many years, 2 or 3 years. And there's a guy named Mike Antonovich, which was the county official for LA County, and they beat the wind generators. There are no wind generators in the LA County. And he says, you know what, from all the evidence that you provided, I don't see where this is still an ordinance in LA County today. So we can beat these folks. But if they get in, it's even harder. So you gotta nip it in the bud now.
What I've been
That's just my
telling-
piece.
Yeah, what I've been telling people when they say, well, what about my property rights as a leaseholder? Well, first of all, in the wind turbine lease, it says specifically on page 1 that they are here just to assess the wind availability. That's what you're signing on the contract. You're not signing that you're going to get a wind turbine, because they have to assess it first. And then they say in the contract that they may or may not build on your property. They may build on the one next to you, but not yours. You do not know, and that is not engraved in stone on that contract. It's just an option. It's a place in line.
And if you were to sign one, a typical industrial wind turbine lasts 30 to 35 years. That's all. And under the lease agreements, for instance, that Scout provided, in 20 years, after they become active, in 20 years, Scout will determine how much it will cost to remove it down to 4 feet below subgrade. That giant Hershey's Kiss of concrete and rebar is still going to be there. And then they will post a bond in the amount that they determine it will cost them to remove that wind turbine. You don't have any say on the size of that bond. And that's assuming that they're even here in 20 years. Or if they are here, they have the money to post a bond. But they haven't sold it. They haven't sold it to somebody who doesn't have any money, who's just selling it for the electricity or for the tax credits. So, you know, I would never advise a client. Of course, it's a client's decision. But if I had a client come to me with that lease agreement, I would say, are you effing crazy? But it's not my decision, it's the client's decision. I'm not an Arkansas lawyer, just so I can make it clear, but I am a lawyer, and it's just shocking what this wind company has gotten away with, and what all these wind companies have gotten away with. And that they're being either because they get production tax credits or they get flat out money from the government. How much money is being basically thrown at it because it is quote unquote green energy? Well, I don't care. There's an environmental cost to all of this energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you know, it is not a solution.
I was gonna
It's a
say-
way to make money,
Yeah.
but it is not a solution.
It's a money grab.
And it could be a land grab, because here's the thing, this people just starting to talk about. Remember I mentioned the fiberglass blades, well, there are forever chemicals in those things. And so what happens if somebody's property is now contaminated with the fiberglass and the EPA comes along and says, oh, your property is contaminated, you can't live here.
No, what the EPA will do to the landowner is say, you've got to clean it up. And then that landowner goes to the wind company and says, well, I'm having to clean this up. First of all, you waived any claim against the wind company. And secondly, even assuming that they have any responsibility, they may not have the money. So there are wind farms, there are farmers who have wind farms in Nebraska who end up having to sell their farms to clean them up.
Yeah, I talked to a man whose brother had turbines when they first came out in the 1980s in Colorado, so he made a boatload of money, because back turbines on this property leaking oil, the EPA came along and said, guess what, you gotta clean it up.
Not only
$1 million to clean it up.
not only is the polluter responsible under federal